Right. So, I promised the videographer I wouldn't use a stand, but that's okay, right? I'm using the stand. Super. Can everybody hear me? Good. All right. Thank you for allowing me to do the talk in English. My German is very, very bad, although German is one of the 3 official languages of Belgium. But if I would do my talk in German, then you wouldn't understand and I would have a very difficult time. So, I want to thank HART and the volunteers here today for having me here today. I'm very happy, I'm very honored to be here. I was here 2 years ago together with Jay Conroy and Benjamin, who is the founder of BiteBack. We had an excellent time, so I'm very happy to be here again. Right, I'll start with introducing myself. I have some beautiful pictures put up. I am the partner of Sarah, first and foremost. I am the guardian of Nick and of Milo and of Riva. I forgot the name of my dog, I'm sorry. They're both from Serbia. And they spent their entire life in an animal shelter, and now they lay on my couch all day at home, and they're welcome to. I'm also the godfather to Charlene, the pig that was rescued from the industry, and Ida, who wasn't rescued from the industry. And you see Sarah and me on a protest in Dortmund at the vegan fest there, vegan street fest in Dortmund, where we were trying to raise funds for pig farmers that were suing us. They lost. Right, so I am I'm also a proud hunt saboteur. Whenever there is the opportunity, we head out to the woods to defend wildlife. And I work at an organization called Peace Action, Vredesactie. And what we do is that we try to boycott armed conflict and its economic ties. So right now we're campaigning to stop Belgian companies from investing or creating weapons that will be used in genocide in Palestine. And we're also trying to get goods from the occupied territories on the West Bank. We're trying to get them banned and out of our stores in Belgium. And also, I'm reluctantly, as India said it, the president of an animal rights organization in Belgium called BiteBack. Why reluctantly so? That will become clear in a moment. I am very proud to be the president, and I will be with BiteBack until my last breath. But I'll explain why I am the president reluctantly in a minute. So, beautiful picture, no? It's in the middle of Brussels. Some disclaimers. I have a lot of privilege in society, so my thinking will inevitably have a lot of dead spots. I don't claim to be an authority to the things I'm telling you here tonight, and I might just as easily be wrong. Some of the things I say may be uncomfortable, but I do think that those are questions we need to ask ourselves to become better activists for collective liberation. And another important disclaimer, in 2023, I suffered from what I consider to be a severe burnout, which brought to light some other mental health issues. I'm still recovering from it. I'm trying to finding a way to organize my life again. And this is the second talk I've done since that period. So thanks for being patient with me if I slow down or I need my notes. And I won't be able to be on the ball as much as I'd like to be, but here we are. Right. So when I was writing this talk, I had to seriously think and reflect on all the things that I wanted to tell you, because in those 10 years, I really had like a lecture of 5 hours prepared for you. That's not true. But I had a lot of things I wanted to say. So I narrowed it down to 3 topics. And then I was thinking, like, why am I talking about these topics specifically? And I came up with 2 important reasons why I chose those 3 topics. The first one is the number of people that became an animal rights activist around the time that I became an animal rights activist and are still with us today, I can count on one hand. So there's a revolving door of activism and activists in our movement. I've seen busloads of people come and I've seen them go already, which impairs our growth. It stops us from becoming this large, mature movement like we see other movements, and it stops us from being a force to be reckoned with in society. The second reason why I chose the 3 topics, it won't be this complicated, the entire talk. I've been following this movement since I was 15 years old. And in those 2.5 decades, I've seen a large number of tactics and strategies being deployed, which normally is a very good and healthy thing. But in the last decade, I've seen almost a unique focus on one strategy. And I've participated in that strategy intensely. But now I have serious questions with that strategy. That's why, because of these two reasons, I came up with these three topics to discuss with you. First are the circles of change, how we need to frame our activism, or how I think we should frame our activism. The second is intersectionality, how do we widen our movement and we keep people on board. And the third is veganism as a tool. Is this strategy helping us to reach our most sacred goal? In these three topics, I'll discuss the work that BiteBack does. But first, let me give you a brief introduction to BiteBack. You can find everything on the website. That's the go-to option. So BiteBack is Belgium's oldest animal rights organization. It was founded 21 years ago by two activists, one of which is still with us today. And we evolved from a do-it-all and being active on all topics of animal abuse to a professional organization with 3 people on the payroll and 3 very specific campaigns. So first is Dürfen and Vrij, or Free the Dolphins, Stop the Animal Industry, and Animals at the Intersection. So, Belgium still has 1 dolphinarium, can you believe it? Only 1. We've been campaigning against them. It's in Bruges, you know Bruges from the movie in Bruges. We've been campaigning against them for over 12 years now, 8 of which we stood at their gates every month picketing. And the last 4 years we designed a very specific pressure campaign against. Last year, our state secretary, I don't know what the word in German is, the minister, he issued a ban on dolphinaria. So dolphinaria are now forbidden in Belgium, in Flanders, but he exempted the 1 existing dolphinarium, he exempted them from the ban. So that's typically a right-wing policy to do. So you issue a ban, you can't start a dolphinarium in Flanders anymore, but there's 1 horrific dolphinarium that's still in existence that gets a permit to keep on going. This is a, 2 weeks ago, he decided on not issuing or making the permit longer than 2037. So not only is there a ban in place now, they have to close shop in 2037. And that's like a huge win for us, but 2037 is still a long way to go, right? So we're planning on fighting them and their economic partners, so they'll close shop before 2037. Of course, the ban, we're considering the ban and that proposed shutdown, of course, as a major win for us. The second is Stop the Animal Industry. It's a much wider campaign. As a sub-campaign of Stop the Animal Industry, we're pressuring retailer Lidl to get rid of rabbit meat. And we target that sector specifically because it's already in steep decline in Belgium and it's subsidized heavily. It's incredible how many subsidies they receive. We've been doing this campaign for 1.5 years now. And 2 weeks ago, the industry announced that of the original 14 rabbit breeders, 6 went out of business in the last 3 years. And this year, another additional 4 announced that they will close shop in next year. First, they blame investment costs. So they issued a report and they blame investment costs because they have to build bigger cages. Those bigger cages aren't helping rabbits because the number of casualties, the number of rabbits injured is still as high as it was when they were in small cages. But they also say that public pressure campaigns like the one BiteBack is waging, and they cited us specifically, we were very, very proud of that, is a reason why they're shutting down. So again, a major win for us. So all that news came out 2 weeks ago. You can imagine, like after years of campaigning, what a beautiful week that was. Our third campaign is Animals at the Intersection. It's much more a form of showing up for other struggles, for other movements, showing our solidarity and implementing measures that makes BiteBack as welcoming as possible to people that don't look like us. I'll come back to that as well. So what I've summarized now in 2.5 minutes is, of course, the work of more than 2 decades, with very high ups 2 weeks ago and terribly low downs. But I'll come back to those very low downs in a minute. So before starting, I'd like to ask for your participation. Here we go. Throughout my talk, I'll give you some questions and some statements to which I would like you to respond by raising your hand. I might ask when you raise your hand a certain way. I might ask for your motivation or your answer. Now, you don't have to participate. You don't have to respond. If you're not up for speaking out loud or making statements in public, that is completely fine. The purpose of the exercise is to make you think about a certain topic or to challenge your ideas, and you really don't have to do so in public. I won't be offended. So, when I read a statement, if you like, you can put your hand up. And if you agree with the statement, you put your hand to the left of you. Try not to hit anyone when you're doing so. And it's your left, not my left. And when you completely disagree with the statement, you can put your hand to the right. And if you're neutral on the stance, you can put your hand in the middle. Or you say, like, I have some question, I don't know, I have pro and contras, you put your hand in the middle. If you close your fist, I will not address you. If you open your hand, then I might ask for your answer. Is that okay? I'll first do a tryout, just to get things warmed up. First is, that was my slide to introduce my exercise. Vegan ice cream is the best invention ever. I mean, there never was a better invention than vegan ice cream. Bless the people who invented vegan ice cream. If you agree and you want to respond, you want to make your statement public, you put your hand to the left of you. If you say, no, I don't agree whatsoever, vegan ice cream sucks, then you put your hand to the right. If it's in the middle, then you have pros and contras. But somebody, pros and contras, all right. And if you close your fist, I won't address you. If you open your hand, then you allow me to appoint you to talk. Can I ask what you think?
I was thinking, of course, it will have a positive impact because more people are able to eat ice cream that are vegan or want to eat vegan.
Super.
But it might not have the biggest impact because it's just a very small, well, yeah. For example, it's just in summer, it's slow season.
Wow.
Limited.
Yeah.
That's not, why not the best?
Yeah, that was a super, you gave it a political twist. I love that. Thank you. I would say, my hand would be in the middle. I would say penicillin is probably a better invention than vegan ice cream, but it's in the top 3 though, of best inventions ever. Right, so all kidding aside, politics has nothing to do with animal rights. Politics has nothing to do with animal rights. If you agree, you put your hand to the left. If you say like, yeah, I have some pros and cons, maybe it's a bit political, I know this one politician. And then if you put your hand to the right, it says, no, that's nothing to do with. So I'm looking at your left and your right, I have to cross it. All right, and if you open your hand, can I ask what you think?
Politics have a lot to do with animal rights. They decide about animal factories, whether they install or not. They decide on what or how animals have to be kept in these places, so as long as they can go on. And
Yeah. Okay. Can I help with the instruction? Is there something like this? Super. Thank you. Thanks for the answer. All right. So my first topic. So we're all warmed up with the statements, right? So my first topic is. I think we should, every political movement, every civilian, every activist needs to think in circles of change. This means the following. So the micro level, the little red dot there, that's you. Change comes when you on a micro level work to get organized with your surroundings. And your surroundings, that's the meso level, the green dot. As a collective, on the meso level, we try to influence or get enough influence to make change happen in the bigger society, and that's the macro level. The macro level has an impact on what the meso level does and what the micro level does. But the other way around, you influencing the macro level, that's not that simple and straightforward. So making change is all about the influence or the impact you have, that we have. On a micro level, I can have some impact, but it will not be very big. When we organize on the meso level, our influence will become bigger. When we organize and reach out to other movements, our meso level keeps growing. And then we might influence the macro level. It applies to the struggles you fight in, but also to your family dinners, your friends groups, your workplace. Whenever you want to make change happen, you as an individual do not have that lot of impact. You need others, you need your surroundings to influence the larger sector, the larger circle of change. So when you're focusing on a problem or you have to make a choice, it's always worth to consider how are my actions affecting my surroundings and how are my surroundings affecting the macro level. This is a political emancipatory way of thinking that found its origins in the workers' unions, in the workers' movements in the social justice sphere more than 100 years ago. But it's becoming more and more rare to us. Because since the Enlightenment, individualism has been on the rise. And during the Enlightenment, that was really a good thing that we have individualism, that we don't have like sectarian churches telling us what to do. But in this late stage of capitalism, that level of individualism is reaching ridiculous heights. Individualism really is grounded in the way we look at things. It's in our way of looking at the world. It's the glasses we have on. It's the, and I hope I'm using this word correct, it's the leitmotif that we have. Because of this leitmotif, we think in terms of what can I do to create change? How are my actions going to affect? How am I going to stop climate change? How am I going to do my part? As you might have realized, the part that you can do is incredibly small and has little impact. Yet that is exactly what the government and organizations and companies are constantly referring to. And I think that thinking in this way, what can I do to liberate animals? I think that is the perfect recipe for burning out of activism. The perfect recipe for not doing anything at all. Because we all know people in our surroundings that say, oh, what are my actions going to change? How am I going to do something about that problem? When we think in terms of what can I do, we are thinking in a mindset that puts us in a circle of change that has the least impact of all. We should be asking ourselves, what can we do? How am I going to influence my surroundings so together we can influence the macro level? Always frame your actions in the blue arrow, going from the micro level directly to the meso level in order to achieve the macro level. Often in the vegan movement, we place our hopes in individuals, in celebrities and athletes and musicians and actors. We place our hopes in them to convey that vegan message, to persuade as much as people as possible. But no movement of social justice has ever been brought about by individuals. Behind famous icons like Rosa Parks or Marsha P. Johnson, there were always vast amounts of numbers of people striving for change. There were always coalitions being made between movements. The meso level was always stretched. I'm not saying that we need to convince everyone in society of the justice of our cause, but I am saying that if we stretch the meso level, we can push our way into the macro level, we can demand rights, and we will not move until those rights are granted. Another important thing about these circles of change is they put into perspective what can be expected of us, what can be expected of me. By no means can I fix the climate problem, whatever I try to do, or can I achieve animal liberation. You yourself cannot fix macro problems. You cannot fix problems that are happening on a societal scale. Thinking in terms of the individual sends us on a guilt trip, and we have to actively practice how we can get rid of that guilt trip. Because we've all been there, we've all felt powerless in the face of huge problems, or we felt guilty for doing as little as we can, or it weighs us down and we feel hopeless and we stay out of this movement and people leave and people don't come back. Here's a simple rule. If you can't do it, you shouldn't feel obliged to do it. Ought implies can. Before it can be expected of me to do something, I should at least be able to do it. This does not mean that you don't have any responsibility to do something. You clearly have a responsibility to do something, but you should do something that lies in the range of what you can do. So my point here is that there is no I in movement. Either we do it together or it doesn't get done at all. As a movement, we are way too small and much too young to be able to handle a huge task like animal liberation. Easier said than done. So what should we do then? Well, anything that makes the meso level stronger. Work with organizations that bring people together, working campaigns, build movement around you, doing talks like this one, doing movie nights, doing picnics, get-togethers, action trainings, campaign trainings, cookouts, protests, pickets. Do whatever it takes to make the meso level bigger. Engage actively in community care. We should work in alliances. We should show up to other struggles. Rally people around issues that don't necessarily concern you. Rally people you might have differences with, but with whom you can find compromises. Always reflect on what it is we're trying to achieve, and in what circle of actions are your actions taking place. What can we do to further strengthen the we? How can we make our we, our meso level, bigger? The beauty of these circles of change is that if it moves us in the right direction, everyone can do something, and you're not bearing the burden of that desperately needed change alone. Now, of course, not only do we need to strengthen the meso level, we also need to feed into the micro level. Do what gives you energy, what you like to do. Do whatever it takes for you to stay in this movement for the long run. You shouldn't let norms in organizations or in movements dictate what you have to do. Often, as animal rights activists, our first go-to option is we should take it to the streets, we should do protests, and that is super fine, doing protests. But if you don't like to do protests, or that's not a safe space for you, then don't do protests. Use your skills to do other things. You could design, you could do IT, you could copyright, you could bake cupcakes, you would whatever. You could raise funds on your own, you could spread those cupcakes in your neighborhood, and you could tell people why you're doing it. So do what strengthens the micro level and the meso level. Now, in my years of activism, I sound incredibly old when I put it like that, but in my years of activism, I've been back and forth on the things I felt I needed to do. I started out with doing almost everything, and that's not a good thing. I mean, I organized bake sales, lectures, organized protests, handed out leaflets, hold up picket signs, did work below the radar, organized bigger events, and I felt I needed to do all those things, although I realized that after some time, I really didn't like to do most of those things. I was never really happy or fulfilled with the things we were doing. It always felt like it wasn't enough. It felt like it was like a drop on a hot plate. And that was because I was looking for shortcuts to influence the macro level. And as I found out, there are no shortcuts to building movements, to doing campaigning, to staying motivated, to reaching that macro level. Although I stayed with BiteBack always, and I always will, I tried different forms of activism just to get that sense of a win every now and then. And after years of doing almost everything at the same time, I started to focus only on those things that I thought then were very efficient and very effective, because those things would certainly get us the wins. So I ended up doing only very specific things, which again brought me little fulfillment. For instance, leafleting at a university, because there was this research agency that said if you leaflet on the specific page with those leaflets, then you would certainly persuade people to go vegan. By that time, the only thing that kept me going was moral outrage and a sense of habit. I was always doing it, so why stop? I really struggled with those feelings. And then the pandemic hit. In the years before the pandemic, BiteBack had a huge group of local organizers in Belgium alone, which is like twice Hamburg, and that's the entire country. We had 6 local chapters, one in the Netherlands. They were all people working very hard, all with animal liberation in their heart, looking for a community to engage actively with. And in those years, BiteBack had evolved from a do-it-all volunteer-based organization into a professional organization, like I said, with 3 people on the payroll. But during the pandemic, it became clear that in the transition from a volunteer-based organization to a professional organization, we had made some capital mistakes. We didn't invest enough in our volunteers, in our community. We didn't have any specific campaigns. Our 3 staff members weren't an organized team. They had to do everything all at once. And then when their constant workflow dropped because of the lockdowns, so did they. 2 were diagnosed with a burnout and 1 quit. We had no functioning board. And since we didn't invest enough in our own community, there was no one to step up and help out. So there we were, deciding on whether to throw in the towel on Belgium's oldest animal rights organization. It was a complete rock bottom. My wife was one of the professionals and she was at home with a burnout. And at the end of her sick leave, we decided on what to do with BiteBack. Do we stop doing it or do we go on? So I made myself a board member. I drew in 3 other people. I stole the relaunch workshops from my employer at the time, who was also going through a relaunch. You can see the pattern leading up to a burnout. And we tried to build that organization back up again. My wife became the coordinator. We hired 2 new professionals that are still with us today. And we set out to 3 campaigns, and we started from scratch. We did small protests, we drew in activists, we set small attainable goals, we got media coverage, we got funds, and we took care of our community. We avoided a near collapse, and although we don't have the large community now that we had back in the day, we do have committed activists. We have wins to show for it. We have personnel that happily work for BiteBack. And I'm not saying we're out of the woods, because with rising inflation, our wage costs go up. So in Belgium, inflation and wages are coupled together, which is super in terms of worker rights, absolutely super. But in terms of running an organization that receives 0 subsidies from the government and your donations don't go up as your wages go up, then we're threatening our survival once more. And with fewer activists, of course, we have fewer fundraisers. But at least we have battle plans. We're organized. We have a new board. And in terms of operations, we're more sustainable than we ever were. BiteBack in Belgium is a household name. We're a force to be reckoned with. We show up to other protests and we're growing in reach, in wins, and in community. Now, why have I told you this? More than the pandemic, what nearly made BiteBack collapse was the lack of a strong meso level. If your organization isn't inclusive, if it isn't taking care of its activists or of its professionals, if it isn't thinking in terms of strategy and tactics and campaigns, if it isn't thinking about longevity, as a result, wins will be few and your work will not be sustainable. People will leave and people will burn out. So for yourself and your organization, set the bar at a realistic level. We'll celebrate the wins BiteBack has achieved, but we're not naive. Those wins come with a certain amount of luck and with other factors that we are not able to manage or influence, but we'll celebrate the wins anyway. In terms of campaigning, the least we can do is influence the narrative. Even if your meso level isn't that big, when we constantly work in a campaign that has set attainable goals, wins will come your way. It might seem like a protest or holding up signs when you're standing in the rain isn't doing much and isn't persuading many passersby. But chances are that if you do it at an iconic place on a slow news day, you might get media coverage. Now that media coverage will not result in a slaughterhouse being closed down. But it will influence the narrative. It will place you and the suffering of animals inside the narrative, a narrative that would otherwise be told by farmers, animal welfare organizations, and the industry. Say that you follow up on that media coverage that you got and you press your target with that media coverage and you reach out to your meso level and to other organizations with that media coverage. Look what we're doing. Then you might possibly get the wins. By the way, drawing in people to your actions and to your campaign is already a win. So we should make our movement wider, make it bigger. We should welcome more people and keep them on board. My next statement then. You ready? If I have to vote for the Alternative für Deutschland in order to achieve animal welfare, I will. Yes, that's exactly the response I was expecting. You don't have to answer if you like to, if you don't want to. Take a minute to think about it. So if you put up your hand to the left, you agree, I will. If you put it to the right, you say, fuck no. And if you put it to the left, you say, yes, there's a yes, and I don't know yet, I need more time, this is a stupid question. So I see someone to the right in the middle. If you close your fist, I'm not going to point you. If you open your hand, I will. All right. Can I ask you?
There's absolutely no way that you can fight for animal rights whilst ignoring human rights and racism, because it's all connected. So voting like a fascist government is not going to help animals in the long term.
Thank you. All right, my second statement. Fights against capitalism lead us away from saving animals. And you may replace fight against capitalism, fights against misogyny, fighting racism. If I do that, then I'm focusing too much on things that are not rescuing animals. If you agree, you put it to the left. If you don't, you put it to the right. And if you're in the middle, If you close your fist, I will not. If you open it, I will. To the right, someone to the left, because I haven't. I love how some people are just putting up their fist. I mean, solidarity. Yeah. India can ask you what you think.
Me?
No, the person in the back. Sorry.
I think it's all interconnected. I think that's over the years learned, and whenever we have an issue with not fight, I mean, if we fight for one thing, we actually fight for another thing as well. So, for example, capitalism is a huge fuel for animal exploitation. That's why we have so much animal exploitations, because it's very profitable. So I think there's a direct link, and as well with other forms of oppression, like racism, misogyny. If you fight one thing, you actually fight the other, especially if you bring about human rights, because the possibility of dehumanizing somebody by calling them an animal, that directly into animal rights, like putting the animals lower. Yeah.
Can I just say I'm loving you as an audience? I think we should stand for collective liberation for 3 reasons. First, if we're anti-speciesist, we fight for every sentient being that can experience harm and that can be oppressed. Second, there will never come a time in which animals are liberated while other minority groups are oppressed. And third, we don't need to count on the ruling and dominant class in order to get systemic change. So both, and first and foremost, in terms of being a decent human being, and second, in terms of strategy for animal liberation, we need to stand in solidarity with others that suffer from oppression. As I've said with these circles of change, our movement is way too small to achieve our goals or to achieve change at the macro level. We will not win this fight alone. We have to make sure that other groups in society take up on our message, so that our message becomes as household as the climate message or equality for LGBTQIA people. But in order for us to become good allies, we have to know our place. When we demand animal rights, we're by definition doing so as allies. Demanding rights as victims of oppression is different from demanding rights as allies. So in order to be a good ally to the victims of oppression, we have to check at what intersections our identity lies. So, here's a bit of theory. Our identity is formed by all these things: health, age, work, gender, orientation, family, schooling, living situation, ethnic, cultural background, philosophy, religion, species, and financial situation. These are all our identity parts. We have a beautiful word for it in Dutch, but I was not able to translate it, so I only came up with identity parts. It doesn't sound good, but here we are. Each of these identity parts has an adhering norm in society. In other words, the way these identity parts are filled in are valued more than others. In our society, a white, heterosexual, just cisgender male with European roots, aged between 30 and 50, atheist or a cultural Christian, full-time job, thin, bit toned, good health, college or university degree, owning his own home that's in a good state, married and has a family with children, and a steady income, is the dominant group in this society. Those are the kind of identity parts that are valued most. Now, the more of these identity parts fall in line with the norms you see here on the right-hand side, the more you enjoy privilege in society. The more privilege you enjoy, the more dead corners there are in your thinking. Since I enjoy privilege, I cannot know what it is not to enjoy privilege. I cannot know what it is to be not to be a white, cisgender, heterosexual male in this society. Or a society in which a cisgender, heterosexual white male and all these things are valued more than others. I'll experience less obstacles in life than a black trans woman does, for instance. Now, these identity parts give us certain needs and interests in society, all of us. For example, when I'm not in best health, I need to have excellent healthcare. That is a need I have, and it translates into a political interest. I have to fight, together with others, for good, affordable, accessible healthcare. That's obvious. What I'm trying to say is that each of these identity parts comes with needs and interests, and each identity part comes with societal norm, and therefore in our society there's a constant struggle of interest and there's a power imbalance. Now, why is that important to me or to us as animal rights activists? I'm an ally in this fight for liberation. I can be an ally because I enjoy a certain amount of privilege. I do not have to fight for my own rights. They are already granted to me. I have the time. I have the opportunity to come to Hamburg and to speak to you. I was brought up in a certain way and all these things. I cannot blame others for not immediately standing up for animals. I cannot cast judgment on others who are busy fighting their own fights. I cannot dictate what their fights have to be and how they should fight them. So I best listen and learn from others so as to become aware of the dimensions of their struggles. Because without me being aware and not empathetic, I will not be considered trustworthy. I will not be able to find the right things to say or how to say them, and I will not find the right way to act. I will not find a listening ear among those that suffer from oppression that I clearly do not suffer from. So we best stand in solidarity with less privilege, and here's the strategy part. Because the most powerful and dominant people in society, they seek a status quo. They do not wish for change, since change might affect their powerful position. In other words, animal liberation will not be brought about by the rich, powerful, ruling and dominant classes. As systemic change has never been brought about by those in power, systemic change will only come from those with less privilege who are fighting and their allies. So again, how do we expand that meso level? We invite others in who have a heart for animals, who are fighting a fight for liberation. But passively not excluding them is not the same as actively including them. Of course, you will not stop someone from joining your organization, but will you create a safe space for them? Will you listen what those people ask of you, what they have to say? Will you adapt your organization to their needs? Will you create a space in which they feel safe, valued, and heard? And will you stand up for what they think is important? We shouldn't treat people as a means to our end. We should treat them always as an end in itself. Don't show up for them merely to voice your message. Help them voice their message and create a safe space with them in which you can voice your message. The most effective way of staying a small fringe movement is to allow racists, transphobes, and misogynists into our movement. If we make excuses for racist, transphobe, and misogynists, we're making ourselves untrustworthy and unwelcoming. We're closing off our circle to people who suffer from oppression. People that have done things for animals don't get a free pass when it comes to spewing hate towards others. So when we share quotes from Gary Yourofsky or Brigitte Bardot, Morrissey, Paul Bashir, the victims of far-right politics will regard us as unsafe, as an accomplice in that racism. If we only place white males at the forefront of our movement, we're pushing people away. Also, as regards to the AfD, and I probably don't have to tell you this, we see a movement of far-right people entering and parties entering the animal welfare scene and even the animal rights scene. Now, I probably don't have to tell you this with a show of hands a minute ago, but we should resist the far right whenever, however we can, by any means necessary. But it's not only the fascists we need to be concerned about. It's like Christopher Sebastian said, no movement for liberation has ever been born from a conservative ideology. And when conservatism appears in progressive spaces, it is always to the detriment of our movement. So, those were my two topics on why I think we can widen our movement and keep people on board. I have a question. Who has seen this guy's, who knows a cranky vegan? I won't point you, yeah. Who knows this series, Are We Winning? If you haven't seen it already, it's on YouTube, it's free. You should really check it out, it's really worth it. He's a really cool, nice guy, most of the time. Who was here, except for the cool volunteers of HART themselves, who was here for his talk in 2022. So, all right, super. So he was here 2 years ago, that's why I asked. So the statement is, spreading veganism is the best way to achieve animal liberation. We should do it more. If you agree, you put your hand to the left. If you don't agree, you put your hand to the right. If you put it in the middle, then yes, no, I don't know, maybe. If you open your hand, I can appoint you. If you close it, I won't. You don't have to speak in public, of course. So to the left is you agree, to the right is you don't agree. All right, all right. Sir, can I ask you, I'm sorry if I called you sir if you're not identifying as such, but you put your hand in the middle. Can I ask why?
Yeah, people sometimes say I look quite Dutch, actually. So
You're Dutch.
Dutch.
You can't help that, I'm sorry.
I think, well, I'm a bit split on this question because I think on the one way it's good to be a vegan simply for giving an example, so that your friends, people you hang out with, can simply see you and ask you why are you living this way, why are you this way. On the other hand, we know that it's so important, for example, that there's a good availability of mock meat in the supermarket, for example. That is maybe a much better way to do something for animal liberation. So it's maybe not a personal level, but maybe working in institutions or in enterprises. So that's why I'm not clear on that question.
Okay, super, thank you. All right, that was my statement. Here is an unpopular opinion I'm coming with. So spreading veganism is something this movement has been doing since the 80s. It's a super fun way to introduce people to a cruelty-free lifestyle. It brings us together around food, which is always a great idea. And maybe it introduces us to other topics as well. It's a perfect way not to have to confront people with the massive suffering of animals that goes on each day. And it's a way to give them on that micro level, to give them tools for change. For a lot of people, it's a stepping stone towards activism, and it's the antidote to feeling powerless. It's a conscious choice we can make every single day. Veganism is important to you if you're a vegan, for you to find like-minded people, for you to find a community. That is all super important. Nothing that I'm going to say does away with that. We all need a community, and we all need to strengthen our meso level. We all need to find like-minded people. The question it raises with me is veganism a means to achieve our goal? And what are the benefits and disadvantages of doing so? Because our goal, animal liberation, is sacred. Because it is sacred, we have to be very critical of the means that we use to achieve that goal. That's why I have serious questions about spreading veganism as a strategy for animal liberation. Vegan outreach, or the focus on persuading people to go vegan, has become the center pillar of our movement. Even more so when a decade ago the animal rights scene was the vegan scene. Now the animal rights scene is only a small part of a much wider vegan movement, with vegan organizations devoting all their means, times and people solely to vegan outreach and vegan lifestyle, sometimes not even mentioning animals. The line of reasoning the vegan movement deploys, seems to be this. If there are enough vegan options in society, people will find it easier to go vegan, and eventually will do so. If enough people eat vegan, the demand for meat and dairy goes down. If the demand for meat and dairy goes down, then the supply for meat and dairy will go down. If the supply goes down, then the animal industry crumbles and we get animal liberation. If this is indeed the line of reasoning we're deploying, there are a number of things we have to be very clear about. First, we're deploying a market-based mechanism to achieve a social justice goal. We're trying to buy our way into systemic change. We are relying on individual consumer choices in a capitalist society to attain our most precious goal. Second, in each of these steps, there are very big leaps of faith, which are not supported by facts and figures, and this reasoning leaves out other key pillars that the industry has put in place, the animal industry. I might be wrong, but buying our way into social justice has never worked before. The thing is, with the estimates the Vegetarian Society in the UK made in the 80s, they figured that the number of vegetarians would go up every decade. And by now, we'd have the vast amount of people in society that would at least be vegetarian. Instead, what we've seen is that the number of vegetarians stagnates throughout those decades. And today, not even 10% of the population calls itself a vegetarian, roughly the same as it was in the 80s. Although I do admit 40% does indicate that they ate less meat than that many years ago. The same can be said of veganism. Although there are tons of vegan options in the stores, even in the countryside in Belgium where I'm from, And our presence online is enormous, and there are big companies advertising in vegan food. Veganism really has entered the mainstream at a much faster rate than vegetarianism did. Yet the number of vegans in society, in Belgium at least, hovers around 1 to 2% of the population. And to me, what's more important for me is the vast majority of people going vegan stop doing so within the year. And we're talking about 80% of people going vegan stop doing so within the year. What's more important, to me at least, is that in Belgium, the consumption of eggs is going up instead of going down. The number of animals slaughtered in Belgium stays the same, goes down a bit, then goes up a bit. So they fluctuate, they hover around the same percentage and the same number. And the World Health Organization estimates that by 2050, the demand for meat and dairy worldwide will have doubled. So we have to be honest with ourselves. There's absolutely no evidence that spreading veganism will save animals from slaughter. When we see a graph that says 1 day of veganism saves 1 animal, X amounts of water, X amounts of CO2, we have to be honest here. These are abstractions, not real-world figures. It's not the case that because I eat vegan today that a specific pig wasn't slaughtered. Or it's not even the case that my veganism created a lower demand and therefore the industry bred 1 pig less. The same goes for CO2 and for water. That's not how the supply and demand chain works. Yet that is exactly what vegan organizations are constantly telling everybody, creating the impression that if we all switched to veganism, that we would save all these animals. It's simply not true. And what's worse is that it makes people believe that their initiative is saving animals, when it's actually not. And therefore it might waste the initiative that people were willing to take. One of the reasons why creating less demand does not affect the industry is that it does not change the vast amount of subsidies that go to the animal industry. Those subsidies are so huge that they even keep parts of the industry alive, when in fact those parts of the industry should already be gone. Yet in my country, no one is challenging the subsidies except for BiteBack. No one is even talking about subsidies. Subsidies and how to fight them is a tedious and a long fight, not appealing at all. It's complicated and quite boring, really. The subsidies are one thing. The protection of the industry by the government, by the EU, by law, by education, even by our healthcare system, they are all different pillars of the animal industry that they depend on to survive, that have nothing to do with supply and demand. Yet as a movement, we're only focusing on that one pillar, being supply and demand. Don't get me wrong, veganism is my moral baseline. My body is not a graveyard. I personally know pigs, cows, sheep, goats, turkeys, chickens. They are all sentient beings. There is simply no way that I will eat them or bodily fluids coming from them. Veganism says something about me. I am vegan for animals. I care about their suffering. I do not want to participate in their suffering. It is a central tenet of my philosophy, of my value and belief system. It's how I want to live. It makes me want to fight. We were all brought up in a society that centers individualism. I already talked about it. But our morals are rooted in Christianity and its different churches. So it shouldn't come as a surprise that we feel we need to convert others into our belief system. And those that don't share our belief system, we consider to be moral monsters, exactly like the churches did. And we also believe that the individual is the center of what's important, and that the individual can hold the power of change, making choices freely and act accordingly, exactly what liberalism taught us. While in fact what we're seeing is that converting others into our way of thinking isn't helping to stop the suffering of animals, and that I as an individual hold very little power. So veganism is very, very important to me. But as a tool to achieve animal liberation, it is very, very flawed. I'll certainly admit that vegan outreach has a great benefit. A lot of people, myself included, went full-on activists after going vegan. Often we think that we align our behavior with our values, but instead we often align our values with our behavior. For instance, I can be against smoking when I'm a smoker. I can only become anti-smoking when I stop smoking. The same goes for veganism. But the danger with this benefit is that we start gatekeeping, that we uphold purity politics. In other words, we only allow in activists in our movement that are vegan. I've known activists who did superb work in other organizations and other movements, but they never came to BiteBack protests, although they clearly had sympathy for our fight. And then when I asked them, why don't you ever come to BiteBack protests? They say, well, we want to, but we can't because we're not vegan. And I was completely flabbergasted. But to me, this is the clearest example of the impossibility that we uphold. We want everyone to join us in our fight for animals, but we will only take 1 to 2% of the population seriously when they do so. More so, the vegan movement is larger than the animal rights movement. So only a small part of that 1 to 2% is animal rights activists. So that means that we're left with a very, very small group of the population. And because of the majority of vegans stopping to do so within the year, that already small group is continually losing people, which impairs our ability to growth. We can't build experience and we can't do long-lasting campaigns. Purity politics is one of the reasons why our meso level is so small. Now, don't get me wrong, I do understand the sentiment. I feel it too. I once was at a protest in which I overheard newcomers at a protest discuss which kind of salmon was okay to eat, the farmed one or the caught one. Or we went to a protest in Brussels, BiteBack and Sea Shepherd together. And after the protest, I saw a bunch of Sea Shepherd supporters head over to the waffle cart. You know, all know what a waffle cart is. It's a very big thing in Belgium, waffle carts. And so I saw that group heading over to the waffle cart, and I know for a fact that that waffle cart had 0 vegan options. I've seen people with animal liberation tattooed on their arms, and I kid you not, who were discussing with me that they find it very hard to leave meat off their plate. As flabbergasted and as shocked as I was with these examples, I have to realize that I'm shocked about this because I'm more comfortable on my moral high ground being vegan. But I have to realize it's not about my feelings. It's not about me. It's not about these people's cognitive dissonance. It's about our fight for animals. More than 10 years ago, I remember my naive discussions with another BiteBack activist who I was asking what was wrong with eating the eggs from the chickens in my backyard. Now I can't even imagine bringing that up or talking about that topic. But that was exactly what I was doing 10 years ago. We're all on a journey. We have all here too participated in the commodification of sentient, intelligent beings. We've all made mistakes. I'm not saying we should downplay our own authenticity. I'm saying that there can be no holier than thou purity politics at the gates of our movement. If we stop a vegetarian or someone transitioning into a vegan lifestyle at the gate, we're not doing the animals any favors. We need everyone we can get to rally around our goal of animal liberation. We need to widen that meso level. What I'm trying to say is, we need more activists, not necessarily more vegans. More vegans might not get us animal liberation. More activists might. So, to close off, here are 10 tips to keep on keeping on. First, above all, help build a movement. Without a strong meso level, there can be no change. Help organizations work in campaigns, learn and use strategy and tactics, diversify methods, teach new activists, reflect on the history of our movement. Second, do what is necessary for you to stay in this movement in the long run. Resting is a revolutionary act in this society. Be gentle on yourself. Allow yourself and others to make mistakes. You don't have to do it all. You can do what you like to do. Maybe sometimes we need to push ourselves and we need to do things that aren't as fun to do, but remember to take care of yourself and those people in your community, in your surroundings. You cannot solve macro problems. You shouldn't feel guilty for not doing something you couldn't do in the first place. Remember, there are no shortcuts. Third, dare to be critical of yourself and others. Don't be afraid to change your mind, to question yourself, to question the leaders in our movement, and to challenge your tactics. Fourth, if you're privileged, to learn how you're privileged, and listen to those that don't have that privilege. Remember, the dominant class in society do not want change. Even if it's uncomfortable and hard, show solidarity with other liberation struggles. Six is always resist the far right. Always, whenever, wherever. Seven, animal care is incredibly important. We see sanctuaries like Land der Tiere or Forest and Friends in my own country, and they're super important for the animals there, but also for our motivation to do something, to see animals liberated, to see how they should be living. But never let animal care replace your fight for, as tempting as it may be, to replace your fight or your strive for political change. Never give up on your authenticity, but open the door to those that are different from you. Actively work to make others feel at home in our movement. 9. Wins are around the corner and come in different shapes and sizes. They may be small, they may be big, but we have to celebrate them all. And 10. In our campaigns, in our strategies, in our tactics, always center the animals and those suffering from oppression. Thank you for being here and listening to me. Thank you for the volunteers of HART, for the incredible work that you do. It's absolutely super. I want to thank Stefan for being a nice guy in general, and I want to thank you for fighting for animal liberation. Thanks.